Hey everybody, thanks for joining us here today. This is Nicole with Topaz, and I am very happy to welcome back Mr. John Barclay. Hey John.
Hello, Nicole, and welcome back, Nicole.
Thank you.
We missed you.
John, well, I miss being here, so thank you. John is here to present Crafting Your Images with Topaz. I'm very excited to see what he has for us today, especially with the new product updates that have happened over the last couple of months. So super excited to see what he has to share.
Thank you, Nicole. It's good to be back. Thanks for having me again. Just hang with us, folks. This is really very highly technical stuff. You don't want to try this stuff at home. Okay, hold on here. Okay, so do you see my screen?
I do.
Ah, good. There we go. I don't know why I was on Photoshop. There we go. Okay, so here we go again with, I think, webinar number 13 or 14. So thanks for coming back. For all those who are coming back, and hopefully there's some new folks out there. Welcome to the new folks. Hopefully we can share some things today that'll be of value and use. So philosophically, I always like to start and just help you understand that we may not end up with really pretty pictures or finished pictures today, but what we're trying to do, or what I'm trying to do, is just provide some concepts and some ideas and maybe inspiration as to how you might be able to use, in this case specifically, the tools from our friends at Topaz to craft your images. And I use that word very purposefully, I should say, because I think we should be thinking about crafting our images and not just hitting a button and see what it does. The better we understand the software, the more we can then, maybe put it this way, craft what we had a vision for when we were capturing that scene in the field. Okay, so what are we going to cover? Well, the new impressions is a blast, and I'm happy to announce that today, in the background, what they call a silent release, and it'll be probably a full-blown release here maybe tomorrow or the next day, as long as those who are grabbing it on the silent release don't find many problems, and I don't think there will be, because I haven't found many, or any, and that is impression will be updated, or like I say, it has been updated. So I'll be showing you the new version, which has 64 new wonderful presets, of which Nicole is primarily responsible for, and she's done a phenomenal job. You'll see a few of those. And there's a new category too, pictorial category. So I think if you haven't been convinced to try the new impression, I think it'll be a no-brainer after we get done showing you. So it's a lot of fun. So we'll cover that, and then just impression with a layer in Photoshop and show you why that might be important. Black and white effects, and then also talk about clarity and detail. And I tend to talk about clarity a lot. It's probably my favorite program to date that they've come out with, and I think it's really great. But there are people that often ask why detail versus clarity, or the question I think is often, why do you use one or the other? Hopefully we'll address that a little bit today, where we'll take one image and do both of those and then compare those on a different layer in Photoshop, see if we can't maybe demystify that. And then something I'm just going to add today as part of the workflow, because I keep getting asked as I'm leading my workshop, is what's your approach to raw conversion before you get started working with the plugins from Topaz? And I think that's a really good, fair question. And normally at the end, somebody always says, what do you do? So I'm in Lightroom, and let's get started. So let's address the raw conversion. Here we have a scene from this fall of one of my favorite places called Hidden Lake. So what do? I look at my histogram, quite candidly. I don't really even look at the photograph at first. I'm interested in what the data looks like and setting what I like to call a black point and a white point. How do I do that? And again, this is going to be the same, really the same sliders in Adobe Camera Raw and or Lightroom. You might use a different interface or a different Capture One, or whoever you're using. The thought process should be the same. So I'm going to hover in Lightroom. It's easy. In case you don't know this, you can hover and then use your up and down arrow keys. And all I'm going to do is start what I would say titrating down, moving the arrow down until I see in my histogram up here the warning that shows that I have blue or some other color there other than the the default color. And that tells me that I'm starting to clip a channel. And then I back off just one from that, so that goes away. Move up to the white point, do the same thing. Just move over, I'm hitting my up arrow key until, whoops, I see it go red. Now I'm just going to go and hover over that white again, come back, and real quickly, we've just gone and added a whole lot of pop to this image. There's before, there's after. And what you're doing is you're setting, by setting a white and black point, anytime you have missing data on the left side of the histogram or the right side of the histogram, what I mean by missing data is here, let's bring this back. Right here is where the data stops on the right side of this histogram. I'm in the top right side of your screen. There is no data from my little double arrow there over to the right. That is what creates flatness in your image. So if I bring that over until it clips and then come back one so it's not clipping, that is why I've added that contrast or that pop and gotten rid of that hazy feeling. Then from there, it becomes more subjective control. Do you need to bring down the overall brightness? And I would choose to do that with my exposure slider and maybe bring it down 1 or 2 notches. In this case, not much. It looked pretty good. Contrast is subjective. You can add it if you want to. Oftentimes I'm really not doing much with a contrast slider. Highlights are when you have highlights and you need to rein those in. So in this case, up here in the reds, up in the top part of this image, they're a little bit bright. So I can bring those down and bring down the highlights. It's a great slider in Lightroom. Shadows do the same thing. If you have some dark areas, the new shadows in Lightroom 5 is really fantastic. And that's all I want to cover in general. What I wanted to just point out, because I think it's important, is setting that black point, that white point. Now I finally look at the picture and make the subjective choice, do I need to darken or lighten? And by the way, if you do that, make sure once you make a move, let's say you want to bring this down, whoops, it helps to hit the right button. If you want to bring that down, well, you could do that, but just notice you might make a change in your histogram up here or the data. So you might, in that case, I could go one more click up on the whites after I brought the exposure down. So just keep going back and forth between looking at the histogram, and then if you make some changes here, make sure you haven't moved it and clipped any data, because your responsibility, in my opinion, is to present the best possible data you can to your next step. So let's go to the next step. If there's questions at the end, we can certainly do that and cover anything that I might be missing. So let me get on track here and remember what I'm doing. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to choose to bring things out typically to Photoshop, and the only reason I do that is it allows me to have a layer to work with and add new concepts that may be of help to you. So I'm going to create a duplicate layer and work on the scene on a duplicate layer, and we're going to introduce you to the new impression. And you'll see that we're working in version 1.1, which is the update that happened today. So let us do its work here. A couple of new things you're going to see in version 1.1, if you already own this, is you're going to have a new zoom tool over here, of which you can zoom in and make things bigger and smaller. You can click on it and make it bigger and smaller. It's going to default to full screen. And then when you click on this, there is, let me do this again. Now you have a screen over here. So if I were to zoom in, whoops, let's do this. If I were to zoom in, and you know what, let's make this color so we can see what we're looking at here a little better. I can now move throughout the image. This is new, this box up on the top right. Just click through where you want to look. If you don't want that panel to be showing, really simple, just click the plus or the minus here. You can get rid of it off your screen if that's what you want to do. All right, and so the interface is really quite simple, just some different views up at the top left here, a button to click original or not, but quite honestly, you just need to click in the picture itself. It's going to show before and after. Whoops, it looks like I've kind of moved this to a funky place there. Let's just make sure we have that where it should be. Okay, So over here is where you have featured, but then the new one that I spoke about is pictorial. So it does take a few seconds here to build some things, but this is a whole new category that was not in the first release. Yep, helps to not click that. So you have things like obscurity. You have photo paintings, things like that in the background. So you'll see, and, I'm not going to go through all of them here. We're going to settle on one. And the other major difference is if you go under the painting tab under your categories, this is where you'll see a bunch of new things. Degas, there's a Georgia O'Keeffe, Edward Hopper. Let's see what Georgia looks like. And this is where it'll start to make sense. So you get some fun Georgia O'Keeffe look, Monet-ish, and you'll see some other people are creating some presets here and some oil painting. And so let's kind of settle on an oil paint choice here, because I think that's what makes sense. So here's the before, here's the after, and so with one click you can get an oil paint look, and again, different versions of that. And all these is a preset that allows you to have a starting point or a jumping off place. Then if you want to further enhance that or alter that look, the icon that pops up in the middle of the preset here, which shows the tools, you click on that, and that slides in the panel where you can now further adjust and make changes to the amount of paint that you're putting down, to the stroke width, which is going to have an effect. You're not seeing big changes, which is a good thing. You don't want it to be big changes, but you can change the stroke width of the brush. The type of brush that you're using will have an impact on the look and what is revealed or not revealed. And all these. So I'm not going to go through each one of these individually. You can kind of figure out just by playing with them, the smudge tools, making those swirly shapes softer and bigger, and you can play. But let's finish the right side, I guess. The color is simply what you would think it would be. If I click on the red, what's nice is it's going to show you where the red is and what it's picking up, and now you have an HSL or a hue, saturation, and lightness ability to affect the color and make it a different hue should you want to, or you can saturate it more if you'd like to. So you have control over the individual colors here in this section, and then typical lighting choices, whether it be light, a brightness contrast, and add a vignette, and then you can even add texture by choosing a texture. Whoops, I got to choose a texture first. Choosing a texture, and you'll probably see that texture start to come through. So if you want it to look like a faux piece of paper or canvas or what have you, you can add that in as well, bring it down to 0 and turn that back off. So that's just a real quick cursory overview of the control that you have over the preset look to alter it. Some are going to have more of an effect than others, but let's go down to the bottom left side and look what we have. This is a wonderful addition over some other programs that do similar things. I have the ability to change the strength of this effect, and so now before, after, you're not seeing much at all, way down at 27%, but if we bring it up to 65% before, after, now it's a little more tastefully applied than if it was just in its full effect. Some people don't like the painterly look out of a photograph. Other people do. They look really nice printed on canvas. So we're going to do another picture here and just kind of cement some ideas, so just be patient. I want to go ahead and hit OK on this and let it do its job here. And what it's done, because I put in a duplicate layer, it's gone ahead and added the oil paint that we chose. And the reason I will bring it back to here is what you can do here, and this is something I do quite frequently, is rather than bring the opacity back in impression, which you certainly can do, and the reason that's really good is if you're working only from in Lightroom and you don't have Photoshop, and thus you don't have the ability to mask a layer, well, at least you can rein back the strength of the effect with that slider in the bottom left that I showed you. But if you have Elements or Photoshop and have the ability to do things like layers and masks, here's what I would recommend you do. I would go to the opacity slider here. I'm over here on the right side of my screen in my layers palette. And the opacity slider here affects the relationship between the layer 1 and the background layer. So the relationship between these two is affected by this opacity slider. And it's essentially doing the same thing when I bring it down to, let's say, 64-ish%, and I turn that layer on and off. I'm essentially showing you what that strength slider did right from within the plugin. But I'm doing it here, and here's why I would choose to do this. And if you're not familiar with layers and masks, it's a different discussion for a different day. But I'm going to go down the bottom right side of my screen. There's an icon here. If I hovered over it right next to the FX icon, that will give me what we call a layer mask. And then if I tap the letter B for brush, that's a shortcut key to get my brush tool, and then make sure over here I'm painting with black or white. And in this case, I want to paint with black, so I hit the letter X. The letter X toggles between black and white. Now I can check, see what my opacity is, because up at the top of a Photoshop screen, this is the properties for the tool you have selected. So I've selected a brush. So this is the properties for that brush, and I can select the type of brush here. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and keep it as a soft edge brush. Okay, so now what can I do? Now what I can do is I can come to the trunk of this tree, and I can paint with black, and I can remove the painterly look from that, and then maybe from the ground, or the foreground here. And again, this might not be what I would do exactly, but I want to help you understand what the choices are and why you might want to do that. And so now what have I done? I've left the painterly effect in the leaves and the foliage where I'd like it and in the water, but I've removed using a layer mask, and then painting with the color black, found over here on the left side. Toggling back and forth with the X key does that, and now I can even bring back more of the photographic look in this photograph. Not to get too deep in layers and masks, because it does get a little bit confusing, but just again to give you an idea. Just think about the possibilities now. If I reduce the opacity of this brush to something like 20%, well, at that point, now if I paint and say, you know, the foliage, the effect that the Topaz plugin Impressions did here is too much. Well, now if I paint with a 20% opacity brush, it's 23, right? You know what I mean? It's not going to remove all of that painterly effect from this section of the photograph. It's just going to remove 23% in this case. And hopefully that's an aha moment for folks going out there, because you might want to have that painterly effect on just a bride's dress in a photograph, but you want everything else to look like a photograph. Or you just might want to have a subtle amount of that effect being shown through. And now you can do that. And I don't know how easy it is to see on your screens, but right here in my mask, you can see black at the bottom, which is indicating that this has been removed, so that impressions effect has been removed here and here on the tree. And then there's a very light gray where I've painted here in the photograph to remove 23% of the impressions. And if I paint here, it'll remove 23%. And I've just done that, and you'll see that gray area get bigger. So I don't want to spend too much time on this, but we've accomplished an awful lot in being able to create a painterly look, and then with layers and masks, place that look and fine-tune that look to be what we want it to be. Okay, I'm going to move on because they always take longer than I think they're going to take, and I want to get to some other things. So let's use this one. Let's do the same thing. We're going to go edit in CC. Now that we've done the background work, we can move along a little bit faster. So let's go up here, down to Topaz. Oops. Let's go over to Impression and open it up again. I'm sure it's going to be sticky settings because most of Topaz products tend to be that way. So it'll go out and want to apply the last thing we did. Let's let it build its previews here. Okay. I need to resize. There we go. So let's go here. Let's go to painting. And this is really wonderful, actually. This is a lot of fun. I could spend hours doing this, but let's go down to watercolor. And let's pick watercolor too. And we need to make this fit. Sorry about that. Look how yummy that is. Is that crazy good or what? So here's before. Here's after. I don't care if you're not a big fan of these painterly programs. This is just wonderful, and if you blend this back in with the original and feather it, remember the bottom left here is the strength slider, so I can go all the way back to the original image, and then I can start to feather in this painterly look. And then imagine now, I'm not going to bore you to death with it again, but I could go in and I could remove the painterly effect on the whole tulip if I wanted to with a layer and a mask, but just take advantage of this beautiful softness that this is creating in the background here, if that's all I wanted to do. But in all honesty, on this one, I adore what it's doing to the flower completely. But again, if you just to review, I can click on the tools, the slider tool icon there, and now I can start to affect, the stroke length, and that'll affect how things look, the stroke width, and it'll make subtle changes here, paint opacity and so forth. And then over here I can change the saturation and start to pump up you don't want to do that, but you get the idea, right? So you can affect a lot of the preset that's there and make it whatever you want to make it. So if you haven't played with impression, it's tremendous. It does a great job of emulating paint, quite honestly, and with what Nicole's added to this by way of these other, let's go all the way down just for fun here. You get down to the bottom where you this is pretty in-your-face bold color here, but you can really start to see how painterly it looks. And here's another one that's really got a soft painterly with a beautiful canvas texture behind it. Okay, we'll move on, and if there's questions at the end, we can kind of come back. But so the new features, zoom tool, a little box that pops up over here if you want it to, where you can move where you need it to go, and you can turn that off. A new featured set here called Pictorial, and a lot more presets, 64 new presets, predominantly residing under the Painting tab. So highly recommended. Get it, have fun, blend it with other things. Don't just think about it as a tool that you have to apply a painterly effect to. It's a whole lot more than that. Oftentimes, just a little trick for you, back to that foliage image, it's common for me to do this one's pretty good, but there's other foliage images where I'll use the term crunchy. They look a little bit over-processed to me, and so I'll go in and use impression as a very low-level oil paint or an impressionistic paint, and then bring it down to like 30% in the opacity, and then paint back in the tree trunks like I showed you here. And normally people have no idea that's what I've done. And again, philosophically, by the way, remember, your processing should be such that people are looking at your work and saying, wow, that's really great, how did you do that? Not necessarily, wow, look at that, that's a great use of Topaz impression, I really like that. That's not really what you want people to say, unless in this case, this one might be one of the rare situations where that's not true. In this case, you may want to have that real painterly look and print it and put it on a wall or whatever. And in that case, obviously, it's going to look like it's an affected image. But if you want to use impression to create a look, that's a different story. Okay, let's go to Childs Falls, one of my favorite places in the Poconos. I was just up there with a couple of back-to-back workshops. And so let's quickly go here. You can see, by the way, I've done my raw processing here and set my black point, white points. By the way, yes, it is clipped a little bit here. That becomes a creative choice. I wanted to have a really strong black, and black shadows really do exist in these scenes. So I've made that choice purposefully. So let's go here. Look at my notes, make sure I'm going to cover what I want to. Yeah, we don't have to do a layer, so we can just open this up. There we go. Okay, so let's go here, and let's just bring up clarity and make sure folks, and again, I'm sorry if you're back again for another time. We're going to go through this, but hopefully we're going to introduce a couple of new thoughts here, even in clarity, to make it worth your while. Excuse me. Okay, so first of all, if you haven't learned maybe from that little raw processing, a histogram is really important to me, so I like to have it available. And it should look like it's all within the goalpost, if you will, meaning there's no clipping on the left, no clipping on the right. But as we start to move these sliders, these 4 sliders which make up the dynamics of clarity, and by the way, so what is clarity? It's a lot like clarity in Lightroom, absolutely. But clarity is just one slider, and it's kind of like a sledgehammer, right? And it's actually very good, but it's only one slider. Here, essentially, what we're doing is breaking up that clarity into 4 different regions or levels of contrast. And so if you push this all the way over, you can get an idea of what it's doing. If you pull that back and put the next one, you can see that it's much darker and in your face, right? So broad, so much bigger contrast it's attacking. And then medium is even bigger than that, and high is bigger than that. And this tends to only work on the very outsides of the tonality. So the high contrast will be really working on the bright brights and the dark darks, medium contrast, and it has to do with the sizes that it's going after. So if you want to understand what the program is doing and how you might start to use these tools on the right side so that you can create your own look rather than choosing some of these by clicking over here. So all this is doing is setting a preset. Once again, that gives us a good idea of what's happening, and it's moving all these sliders around. But I'd much rather reset this and go back and understand how they work. So here's a real common move for me to make, and it's really image dependent, but this is common. I'll bring this one over to like 30-ish, the first one. The low contrast, something less than that, maybe 20. And then oftentimes I'll bring the medium contrast to the left and dial those back a little bit. So let's do before, oops, I gotta hit this, I guess. Before, after, before, after. So I'm gonna do a few times. Look at the rock and the red leaf in the foreground. Look at that first. So that's after, that's before. So what clarity is doing, there's after, is adding beautiful, very natural contrast. It's micro contrast. It's not in your face contrast that's overwhelming. But look what's happened to the histogram, and this is important, and this is what separates clarity from the rest of the pack in my mind. It started to clip on the left side. It's no longer within the goalposts here. Well, this is again where we have a tool that'll fix that. So if I go down to the tone level here, just below my contrast sliders, I can fix that. I can bring the black level to the right until I correct that problem. Now I've fixed this. My histogram is no longer crashing on the left side. So now let's look at before, after. Significant difference. Exceedingly natural at this point. So it's made the colors pop a little bit more because of the contrast that's being added there. The red on the leaf has detail in it. Now the rock has detail in it. All this part of the water here has detail. The water in here is not blown out. If the work I had done in this contrast area had pushed this over, it would have been easy. I would have gone and gotten the white level and brought that back to the left just a little bit and fixed that problem, that adding contrast. And it's important to understand this. Anytime you do micro contrast or local contrast, whatever you want to call them, adjustments, you are in fact going to blow out highlights or block up shadows. You're moving the data. You're pushing it around. And so by having this tool to recover that, it's huge. It's a really big deal. So pretty nice, but we're not done. We can go in here and affect the hue, saturation, and luminosity if we want to. So, and I can do that on a color specific basis. Normally I do all my color adjustments in Lightroom now, but this is as good or maybe better than Lightroom because you have a masking capability. So I can pump up the color of that red leaf. Way too much because you lose detail. So you know, just ever so lovingly do that. And that would be my encouragement, is you should be very gentle with these sliders because you can make it look garish in a heartbeat. So I'm just going to bring these up a little bit and bring a whole bunch of color that I remember seeing in this water. It's the reason I was attracted to the scene, was all that beautiful color reflecting in the water. Okay, but let's say that we didn't want to have all this detail in the rock. Obviously we do, but this, again, we're just trying to teach concepts. I'm going to go back to the clarity up here, and notice for both clarity and hue, saturation, and luminosity, we have a mask capability. So if I roll that open on the clarity one, and I choose edge aware, you have normal, edge aware, and color aware. Edge aware is crazy good inside of the Topaz products. I can make the strength of that pretty high because I want it to do a good job of detecting. The brush size here and the hardness. Notice the circle. So you have an inner circle and an outer circle. The hardness is how the relationship of those two circles. So the more I push that so that it's a bigger edge in the middle, the harder that brush is, or bigger circle in the middle. If it's not, that's a more feathered brush here. The key when you paint now, if notice I have hide, you can reveal or hide here in this panel. I want to hide this clarity adjustment in a certain part of my image, and we're just going to pick this rock for demonstrations purposes. As long as I keep the outside circle, and again, so you can see it, the outside circle can go outside of the rock. The inside circle should not go outside of the rock when you paint. And let's see how good of a job it's going to do. So I'm going to paint here. Come down, and now what I've done is just that fast. Look at the mask up here to the right. The black is concealing that adjustment. Everything that's in white is being revealed. So the rest of this image is receiving these choices that I've made for the contrast. And in this case, I've said, hey, but it's way too much. I don't want it to be on the rock, and you can remove it that easily. Same thing for the hue sat luminosity. If you want to then open up this mask and do the same thing so that you don't have, let's say you had red up in here and red down here, but you didn't want the red to be so amplified or saturated or change the luminosity on any of those, you could conceal that by painting in a mask here as well. So we're done on that one for now. Let me just make sure. So let's move on to the next one because I see my time, as usual, is going to come screaming to a halt. But hopefully you're finding value in this because this one I definitely want to, we got a few minutes. Okay, so we're going to have to go fast. All right. I really wanted to get to black and white, but I think we may not make it. So give me a second, because this is one I want to answer because it seems to be a question every time. So I'm going to make 2 duplicate layers when this opens up in Photoshop. And let's see. Okay. So we're going to start on this one. We're going to go to Filter and go to Detail. And see if we can't answer some questions about detail versus clarity. Let me tell you in a nutshell as this is building, because it has to go through in detail and build 3 different masks, if you will. So details, in my mind, you should think of as a more aggressive sharpening tool. It's adding lots of detail, and it to the point where it can look rather affected, and you can overcook it if you want to pretty quickly. Whereas clarity, as just demonstrated in the previous image, just gives your image that pop that you're looking for, that contrast pop with what I might refer to as apparent sharpness. And it's much more natural. Even if you push it to the nth degree, it's still going to look very natural. So here in detail, we have the ability to work on the small details, and then I can push up the medium details, which I would want to do in here, because in this photograph, what I wanted to do is I wanted to amplify all these beautiful striations in this water, which I could not see easily. So here's before, here's after. It's really bringing out a lot of detail, and that's what I'm after. I'm after detail, and so detail would be the choice for me to go out and really pull this out. I've probably overdone it, but I want to leave it, well, I'll bring it back just a little bit. And I'm probably not going to do the large details at all because then it gets a real garish, as you can see. So you can overdo it, as evidenced by that slider move. So let's leave it at that, and let's select OK. Okay, come on, apply. Takes a second, I guess. Is that okay? There it is. Okay, so if I turn that top layer off, there it is, and it shows the detail. Sorry about that. I lost where I was there for a second. So if I turn that top layer off, which there's nothing in it, you can see now the before and after and the detail that's brought out in all of this water here. Okay, so now I'm going to go up here, turn this one off. I'm going to go up to this layer. Let's go up to filter again, and now let's come back down to clarity. Okay, in clarity, again, what would be my normal moves? You know, something like 30-ish or so here, 20-ish or so here. We'll bring that up a little bit more. And then maybe come in here. And let's look at the histogram, see what's happening. The black level's getting blown out a little bit. So I'm going to bring that down. Keep coming back here. And the white's fine, so that should be okay. And let's see what that looks like. So we'll accept that, and we'll head on into Photoshop, and let's click those on and off here and see what we get. Fair amount of math going on here. Okay, hopefully you can see that well enough. I'm going to maybe even blow that up a little bit. Get my hand tool, because I really want to focus on this part of it. So there's clarity. There's detail. I can see a huge difference. Hopefully you can too. Let me do it again. So clarity here, where you can really see the detail that's been brought out of all these different water pieces here. Turn this off. And now it's much softer in here. Yes, it has certainly brought out some of the detail, no question. It, you know, because in its name, clarity, it's adding some contrast and its apparent sharpness, but it's not near as good of a job of bringing out, especially in this area here around this rock where that water was splashing, and that's what I wanted to create and capture was all of those lines. So my shutter speed, I varied it a lot to see which one would be the best, because water when moving is very different each time. And this one I knew would give me that. So hopefully that solves that mystery a little bit, that you do get a different look depending on which tool you use. Let's see where we're at with time. Hey, I got a few minutes. We're going to do it. So let's go here. Normally don't like to go this fast, but I hate to say I'm going to do something and not get to it. So I've already done my raw processing. In this case, we can go and not go into Photoshop. Let's just remind those as a reminder here. If you're in Lightroom, you need to have Fusion Express installed. Otherwise, you're not going to see. You'll never see your plugins showing up here, although impression does, and I think moving forward it's going to change. You're going to see them here, but for now, Fusion Express, you need to click on that if you're in Lightroom, which I am, and then edit your copy, and then you'll be presented with the choice of the plugins that you own and have installed. Okay, so now I get my ability to pick which one I want to work on, and in this case we'll just do a very quick conversion in black and white effects, and then we'll finish up and take a few questions. All right, be patient here. Okay, so let's reset. And in this case, again, I'm not going to go through because we just have limited time here, but you have all the stylized collections, and you can do the one click. If you want to see what's in a collection, click this icon next to it. It's going to build a preview of all of them, and you can slide through these and find one that you like and use that as a starting point if you wish. Or, as I like to do, I click on the filters and see what they're doing, and usually settle in on one that I like, in this case green, but then I want to point out something really important in the black and white plugin. You have a color filter choice here. So yes, you have 6 buttons you can click just like, and use them like we did glass filters when we were doing film in the days of the dinosaur. And instead of just using those 6, you can then affect the strength of the one you've chosen and make modifications to it that way. Or you can pull this slider here over and have virtually unlimited filter capability. That's a big deal. So use that. Then if you want to just work on the individual colors, then you can pop it up and make it look more infrared-like, which is what I was after with this image, to be honest. I'm making it look a little bit more infrared, so I'll pump up the yellows and the greens. We might, yeah, they're not doing much there. So you get the idea. These are color-specific, whereas the color filter is just the ability to have kind of infinite color filter and strength rather than just one click of a button here. The thing that makes black and white effects so popular, I think, is the ability now to go to adaptive exposure, which is what basically the company was built on, which was Topaz Adjust, and this is basically Topaz Adjust built right in to the black and white software. So we can adjust the exposure from like 1 to 100, think about it that way, or 0 to 1, and we can say, how do we want that adjustment to apply? Do we want it to apply just to the outermost regions of tonalities? Well, that's what we're doing if we put this slider way to the left on regions. If we make this slider go way to the right, now we're affecting all of the tonalities in that photograph, and so we're grabbing a lot more of the colors, tones, and applying this adaptive exposure to lots more of them. And it's going to look very different than if we just apply it to the bright brights and the dark darks. So I hope you understand what's going on there. So this is grabbing, you know, arguably only 50% of the tones, if you will, if it's in the middle, only half of them. And then we can protect the highlights if we're raining there or if we're doing too much. And by the way, up here to the top right, you have the zone system if you want. You can click on that, and now you can click on the colors here. So from 0 to 10, and you can see if you have highlights blowing out that way. You can also see it on the histogram, but you can see what tonal values you have placed in this image by clicking on the Z and seeing what's there. So it's a nice tool, or then go click it off here. Lastly, just to get through this quickly so Nicole doesn't start yelling at me, you can do creative effects by adding diffusion capability, which I do quite often. There's an old webinar I've done where I show softness. And what I would do, and again, we don't have time, but think about this. So it's cool. I love this diffusion, quite honestly. I use it a lot. What I would do, just as a concept here, I would bring this now into Photoshop. I would apply Topaz Clarity to actually bring back some sharpness to this. I might even bring it in as a layer into Photoshop so I can bring back the detail from within the pump and things like that. So that's where diffusion doesn't have to be on the whole picture. If you use a layer and a mask, you can do that. And then, of course, in the finishing touches, if you want to make this sepia, you have the ability to do that by bringing over your tonal strength here and adding a sepia tonality, and then quad tones and borders and edges and all those good things that you might want to do there. I'm out of breath. I don't know about you folks, but let's kind of stop there. Hopefully there was a few new concepts for those who came back. And for those who are new, hopefully there's some new ideas. But just to kind of recap, you know, so because I'll answer the question and a variable comes up, you know, what do you use? What do you honestly use? Well, if you can't tell, clarity a lot. Detail is the first thing I went to because of that photograph. So do I use it as much? No, I tend to go to clarity more. But I wouldn't want to be without detail because that's the only way I could really get that waterfall to bring out that detail in that the way I wanted to do it. As you can see, black and white effects is great, and what I like that I didn't show is there's a transparency slider that brings back color, which most other programs don't have. I like it for that reason, so I tend to use that. The diffusion I use because of black and white effects as well. And if you have noise issues, I do end up using denoise for sure. I do upfront noise reduction in Lightroom, which what I would call capture noise reduction, but then do if you have some really bad noise issues because of a dark capture or underexposed or something, denoise works great. So those tend to be the tools I go running at. And now impressions, I'll be using that a lot. I adore it. I'm thrilled, and I would hope that I had something to do with them making that product because I've been begging for it for a few years. So thanks, guys. All right, yours, Nicole. I'm done.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. And
Yeah.
thank you
If you
so much
ask me
for
tomorrow,
presenting.
you're welcome. If you ask me tomorrow or next week, it'll
It'll
probably be a
change.
different list
That
for the
changes all the
next
time for me
webinar.
too.
Yeah.
So thank you again, John. This has been awesome.
Thank you. It's good to have you back, and thank you for having me. And I look forward to the next one. Thanks
Yes,
everybody for stopping by. Go check out the blog and the web. We'll hope to see you there.
definitely. And thank you, Darcy, for answering questions. Bye,
Thanks,
everyone. We'll
Darcy.
see you later.
Bye bye.